Hello and welcome to the Tennessee Informer. Thank you for joining us tonight. It looks as if New York City will very likely elect a Muslim Marxist mayor, which would be a disaster for the state and will only encourage more Islamists across the country to run for elected office. Dearborn is already gone, as is Minneapolis, and Islamist communities are expanding in Texas, and that in addition to existing secretive compounds in places like Dover, Tennessee, Islamburg, New York, and other places. They have quite a bit of influence in Nashville, Murfreesboro, Knoxville, and Memphis as well. The Muslim Brotherhood long ago laid out their plan for conquest from within. Information has been known to the FBI for over 20 years, yet nothing is being done about it. The government certainly isn't sounding any alarms. Are we ever going to wake up? That's the topic of discussion tonight with Cathy Hinners, author of Muslim Brotherhood, The Threat in Our Backyard, and a special guest, Stuart Reynolds, a pastor from England, who has firsthand experience with Islamists in the UK, as well as some very cowardly government officials. But first, it's time for the Informer Report. The Supreme Court has taken up the Voting Rights Act, and early discussion makes it appear as if they may actually strike down or greatly modify Section 2, which in the past has allowed for majority-minority districts, primarily black districts, and this was done in order to combat historic discrimination. And so if they do in fact rule against that, then there's a good chance, number one, it will be a good thing because now we'll actually have fair districts. We'll have districts that are not drawn by race. Because basically for all these years, the federal government has been using reverse discrimination in our voting. So hopefully that gets addressed. Another good thing about that is the GOP could possibly pick up an additional 19 seats. We'll see how that turns out. We know the left will definitely be upset about that if it happens. We probably won't know till June. However, the court, once they make the decision, they can announce it. They could announce it at any time. Trump is threatening Venezuela. He's already shot, they've already sunk several boats. And I know they had some B-52s fly over the coast of Venezuela. He basically said, I'm telling the CIA to operate there, and he's made threats of taking military action. Now, I would assume that most of that, with the exception of the sinking of the ships, that's really to rattle Maduro, to make him really nervous about what could possibly happen. My only concern is, it used to be if you were going to go to war, you had this thing called Congress that you had to consult. And I know they're worthless, okay? They are generally crap with legs. But we still have this document called Constitution. So we probably need to dust that thing out and maybe read it. As bad as Maduro is, and I understand they're running drugs, and we're probably just sinking drug boats, but we still have a Constitution that we need to follow. U.S. troops to Gaza. The other day, right after the so-called truce kicked in, Hamas in Gaza, they're basically making sure that they are the force in Gaza, the power to be in Gaza. And so they were getting rid of any rivals. There have been several executions. And Trump made the statement the other day that, if they continue, then we'll have to come in and kill them. Gaza is not our problem. I don't even know why we're involved in Gaza. Let Israel deal with Gaza. We don't need to send any U.S. troops to Gaza. The whole place is not worth one American life, in my opinion. Trump, to his credit, made sure that the troops were paid during the shutdown. That's a good thing. It may be a little harder to do in 2 weeks when pay is due again if they don't have the government open back up. He was able to shift around some funds. Not sure that there'll be enough to shift around this next time. And I hope that while we're having this shutdown, that they are successful in cutting out a lot of the wasteful programs in our government. Tennessee is heavily dependent on federal government funding, and eventually some programs will be impacted. Now, I've heard different percentages over the years. I've heard 40% for years. I actually had a rep the other day say it's probably closer to 50% of the money that we get in Tennessee comes from the federal government in some way, shape, or form. And we're just way too dependent on the federal government. If you're relying for 40 and 50% from the government as a state, well, what happens when we finally hit that iceberg? So the smart thing for our state to do would be start immediately reducing their dependence on the federal government. I understand you can't do it cold turkey all at once unless you have to, but we should have a plan. Hey, we're going to reduce our reliance 10%, 15% this year, and that's a pretty good chunk, but we have to do it. That's the responsible thing for our state to do. Let's hope they figure that out. Every year, our government ops committee in Tennessee, they review different programs that come up for renewal. Now, I am not positive if what they do in government ops is the final approval, but those committees make the recommendation at least whether or not to keep a program or to end that program. And this past week, in the Government Ops Committee, the question was brought up about the Tennessee Department of Education, which has really not done a good job in decades. And everybody, with the exception of Representative Monty Fritz, said, yeah, let's renew the program. It's pretty sad that we only have one person out of 15 or 16 on a committee that had the backbone and the good sense to say, you know what? This program is not accomplishing what it's supposed to accomplish. Let's not renew it. So kudos to Monty Fritz. That wraps up this installment of the Informer Report. If you have a news story that you want to alert us to, be sure to send us an email at tennesseeinformer.tv@gmail.com. And now to our guests, Cathy Hinners and Stuart Reynolds, a pastor visiting from England. Thank you both for being with us tonight. How are you guys doing?
Very well, thank you.
Good, thanks, Dave.
Well, we appreciate you being with us. Let's get started. We'll start with you, Stuart. What brings you to the U.S.?
Well, I have the privilege of coming to the United States a couple of times a year to preach. I'm a Christian and a Christian minister as well, and that's why I'm here.
Okay, so and you've been to Tennessee several times, I take it?
Yes, I've been coming to Tennessee really since 2001, but every year since about 2010.
And it's your favorite state of all 50 states, correct?
Oh, of course, absolutely.
It is a great place. So we hear a lot over here about the situation in England in regards to the Islamists and really in regards also to the government that just seems to be afraid to do anything. Can you give us a little better insight since you live there and you live in Sheffield, England, correct?
That's right, yeah.
Okay. So
Correct.
what kind of control, if any, or what kind of impact, if any, do you see there in England in terms of the Muslims?
Okay, well, I mean, the Muslim population has been growing for as long as I can remember. I think it would be good to talk about it. I can give two general examples. You mentioned that our government, and then I would also mention the impact it's had on media. And it's more than just a Muslim impact, but certainly I can give instances where the media, particularly the BBC, favours Muslims. Regarding our government, a couple of weeks ago, our Prime Minister, on our behalf, without consulting the country, took it upon himself to recognise Palestine as its own state, and not even aware that he consulted Parliament over that. On September the 29th, Rachel Reeves, she's our Chancellor of the Exchequer. She's like the money person.
Okay.
She lives next door to the Prime Minister in Downing Street, so she's really the second most important member of Parliament in the country. Very influential. She was giving a speech at the Labour Party's annual conference on the 29th of September, just a few weeks ago. And during that speech, the speech was interrupted by a pro-Palestinian protester. I was watching the speech at the time. It was around about lunchtime on that Monday. In the early evening news, 6 o'clock, the BBC covered the speech but made no mention of the pro-Palestinian protester disrupting the speech. And yet I would contend that had that been a pro-Israeli protester, that would have been headline news and it would have been hammered over that. A few days later, I don't know if you heard the news, on the Thursday the 2nd of October, some people died in a Jewish synagogue in Manchester, in England. That day, that evening in Glasgow, in Edinburgh and London, and other cities I'm sure, but certainly those three, there were spontaneous pro-Palestinian protests celebrating the massacre in Manchester, England, earlier that day. The police found it really difficult to control those protests. But again, I make the point, that evening, the BBC never carried that story.
They never even, I mean, we heard about that over here, but they never even covered that?
Well, no, they did in the days after.
Okay.
But not on that day. Our coverage of the Gaza war with Israel and Hamas, every time, every report on the BBC will begin with, when it makes a reference to Hamas, right at the top, and they'll say Hamas, defined by the United Kingdom government as a terrorist organisation. And yet, historically, when, for example, our own troubles in Northern Ireland, when they would refer to the IRA, they didn't ring fence it like that, or Boko Haram or ISIS. They'd never make that qualification, but only in regard to Hamas. I think that is just to appease the Muslim population in our nation. In my own city of Sheffield, and it happens in cities across every Friday since October the 7th, when I drive through the city at 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon outside the railway station, every single Friday there's a pro-Palestinian protest. And so really, our government seems to be a bit inept in how to deal just with these whole issues. And certainly the BBC is, well, I think it's corrupt.
Most of the press is worldwide.
I'd say again, sorry?
I'd say most of the press worldwide is corrupt.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
For your United States viewers, if you wanted to get what I would suggest the most balanced news coverage about the United Kingdom, from the United Kingdom, would be called GB News, Great Britain News. And they really are giving the BBC and Sky News a run for their money. They're becoming more popular. You don't need to subscribe to it. You can actually watch the programmes, the news coverage on YouTube if you just put in GB News.
So are I've seen these different protests on TV or on, well, actually mostly on YouTube, where the native Britons are pushing back and protesting. Is that something that gets cut? First off, is there as much as there looks like recently? It does seem to me recently, at least what I'm seeing, is more native Britons are pushing back, but I don't know if it's as good as it looks, let's say, or did they get any press coverage over there?
Oh, absolutely. What really sparked that was last August of 2024, in a seaside town called Southport. 3 young girls were stabbed to death They were at a Taylor Swift dance party, and there was, I know we talk about misinformation online, but there was misinformation online about the perpetrator of that he was an illegal immigrant, and that was not wrong. Um, his family are citizens of the United Kingdom, and he's been raised in the United Kingdom. The young fellow that carried this out, and the British protests came as a result of that, and the protests were horrendous, really, and went on for the best part of a month. They would gather outside throughout the country, the hotels where illegal immigrants are placed while their asylum requests are being considered, and they protested outside there, and it became quite violent. So that was a reaction against that piece of misinformation in particular, but also I think of a general concern, almost like the final straw, because of what the immigration crisis in our country is. Your immigration crisis is your southern border. Ours is the English Channel, from the south of England to northern France, and that is our problem. And no government, even the Conservative government before this Labour government that were voted in last year, still are not able to get a handle on it. I think that people are generally getting fed up with the ongoing pro-Palestinian protests. Although I do have to say that in a lot of these weekly protests, it's not just Asian stroke Muslim people. There would be a fair amount of British people on these protests, and the ones which turn violent, the British governments, they'll try and criticise it by saying that it's un-British the way that these protests are being conducted, and that might be true, but that is to miss the fundamental point of Islam. These Muslim communities who are active, they don't want to be British.
No.
Their aim is to make us become Muslim. We understand that. So that's not a put down to them. That's actually a spur for them, because of course, they're being un-British. And I think that is the flaw of both our nations in our inability to deal with this issue, in that both our nations the foundation of our nations is based on Judeo-Christianity.
Right.
And of course, the Old Testament talks about and encourages us to welcome the alien and the slave and all the rest of it. But the fact is, if they're going to come and live in our country, whoever it is, if it's Muslims, Hindus, or whatever, the principle should be that they should live by our values.
Yep. Yeah, they have to assimilate. Have to.
That's our problem in both our nations. I do think that we become very gullible and short-sighted in our dealing with that, and that we have a wrong sense of our own value of liberty.
Yeah. And do you think your government is incompetent, or are they just too cowardly to do what they need to do?
I think they're afraid. I mean, why is it that, I don't know how it is in your nation, but I have family members who have written to the BBC where, in comedy programs in particular, Jesus Christ is routinely mocked and blasphemed. And we've written to the BBC our concerns over that, and the official stance of the BBC is that they are just reflecting societal norms, which may well be the case. But the point that I would make, and we have made to them, is, well, you would never ridicule Muhammad.
Yeah, yeah.
The way that you ridicule Christ, and nor would I condone or suggest they should. I would not want to make a mockery of anybody's religion or their convictions in that sense. But we know what's happened in France in recent years. With remember the cartoonist, maybe coming on to 10 years ago, and people are afraid to make any kind of stance because they just don't know what the reaction's been. And even from back home, some people have cautioned me from appearing on this event this evening because they would be concerned about maybe some of the backlash that I would get back home. So
Wow.
it's definitely fear. It's definitely fear. And of course, we understand that Islam is not based on peace. It's about submission. I'm
Yep.
not telling you, and you don't know, but it's based on fear. And I think that is the problem both in the society in Britain and in government, that they just really don't know what to do.
What
And it
percent?
has reached a tipping point. There's no question about it. I wouldn't, your title of your program this evening, without diminishing the threat and the influence and the presence of Islam in the United Kingdom, I think it is overstating it that it has transformed us forever. It's certainly not doing us any favour, but I don't think that we are very far from a tipping point.
So you're not. So you're still salvageable, is what you're saying. It can still be
Yes, but I
salvaged.
do think yes, yes, and the reason why I think that we're salvageable is because, and the reason why your nation and my nation have got into the bother that we're in, it's not because of Islam. It's because both our nations have turned away not only from our Judeo Christian values, but ultimately both our nations have turned away from God. The Bible says in Psalm 33, verse 12, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. And we cannot say that about either of our nations
No.
anymore. They can just, I think, simply put, United Kingdom is not a Christian nation. Okay, it's definitely the phase that we are in and have been in for a while. We are definitely a pagan nation,
Yeah.
but we are not yet a Muslim nation, if that maybe clarifies it for you.
Right. I understand. Now, so
Yes.
there are some Muslim mayors. I guess the
Correct.
most prominent one being the one in London.
Yes.
How did that happen? Do they have that many Muslims in London?
Well, oh yes, absolutely. They'll have plenty of everyone in London. You know, London being such a universal city. I think it's because the simple answer is democracy. You know, which is our greatest strength in both our nations, but also can be our greatest weakness. So the simple answer would be, well, that's democracy. But all our political parties, um, I mean, up until, I don't know, maybe I would say in the last 25 years, all the political parties thought to be more representative in terms of the what would be termed as the ethnic minorities of our nation. And so I would say that that would also be the secondary answer. Fundamental answer is that's the wonder of democracy. Secondary answer would be that all the political parties have sought to recruit candidates who would be diverse in terms of ethnicity and religion. And there's your answer.
Yeah.
But at the
It's
end of the day, you know, we couldn't honestly say for London Mayor that it was the Muslim vote that swung it for him. He certainly got that, but he won the mayoral election fair and square. And so, you know, was he there because he was a Muslim or was he there because he was Labour? That's the
yeah.
political
just
party
just
that
like a lot of
he's.
people voted for Obama because okay, we'll elect a black guy and then everything will be fine from here on out, and nobody can call us racist again. We elected him twice and now they call us racist even more. It's ridiculous, but
Yes, and of course, just before October the 7th in 2023, Scotland, which is my home nation, Scotland elected as a first. We have devolved government, so one prime minister in the United Kingdom, but it's Scotland, England, Northern Ireland, and Wales. We have what we call devolved governments, and we have in each of those home nations first ministers. And then at that point, just before October 7th, 2023, the newly elected First Minister of Scotland was a Muslim, and he was actually the first one in the nation to, without question and qualification, take in refugees from Gaza as soon as that conflict started. And of course, that caused a bit of a stir. But suffice to say that he did not remain in his post for very long, but not necessarily because of that reason. But yes, I think you're exactly right. I think that nations or political parties, certainly, they want to be able to turn around and boast of their progressiveness and their inclusion about issues like that.
It's that diversity curse.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the government over there, I mean, I know that our government is not quite as politically correct as it was since we got Trump in office, although there's still a lot of problems. But so if you were to speak out against Islam, you know, you mentioned a few minutes ago that you said some people kind of warned you about being careful.
Yes.
So what is the government? Does the government actually take action against people that speak out? I mean, can you get in trouble for like Facebook post or you know, being if you had like an anti-Islamic protest, would that be allowed?
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, and because in 2019 there was an all-party definition, all political party definition of Islamophobia, which all the parties signed up to. And if I could quote, here's the definition for Islamophobia. Islamophobia is rooted in racism and is a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. Now that was, and all the political parties signed up to that in 2019.
All of them?
That has just recently, a big pardon?
All of them? Every party?
Probably with the exception of Reform under Nigel Farage. I don't know if you've come across him. He's probably our equivalent of Donald Trump, and in my humble estimation, probably the best political hope that we have.
What's his name?
Nigel Farage.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah. I would suggest he's really shaking up things in terms of the political establishment in the United Kingdom. But you know what it's like when it comes to a general election, people scared to go away from their traditional roots, you know, but he would have similar principles as Trump in regard to, whereas Trump would be putting America first.
Right.
Nigel Farage would want to put Britain first, which, from your perspective in regard to your president, is absolutely right. He should be putting his own nation first, and also for British politics, putting United Kingdom first. I would just say, at least you have a president and also some politicians who are now able to actually say what a woman is. We have yet to find back home a mainline politician from our Prime Minister down who's able to define what a woman is. And so we're unable to do that. We're not really up to dealing properly with the Islamic threat to our nation. But yes, so that definition that I read a few moments ago, just in the last 2 weeks, has been redefined with one word. With a one-word substitution, and they've taken out the word, the expression Muslimness.
Muslimness. Is that even a word?
They've stopped that, and they've replaced it with the term anti, as you would say, anti-Muslim, but really, in practice, it boils down to, if you follow that definition, it boils down to the blasphemy law. Really.
Yeah, you're right, absolutely.
And which is unworkable. And so, in the United Kingdom, and I'm sure you've maybe seen, because I know that you look into these things, you'll have seen certainly on YouTube videos of Christian street preachers arrested by the British police because they're preaching in the open air, which still, as far as I can remember, is a right of our free speech. They're preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, and if it's not the LGBTQ plus community that's getting them shut down, it would be the Muslim community. But let me tell you this, I don't know if it's like this in the United States. I'd be interested to know if it is. For example, Lord willing, I go back to the United Kingdom on Wednesday, and I'm going to be in London this weekend. And I can tell you, when I go to Leicester Square on Saturday morning, they'll have all their, their street entertainers and things like that, and you have to get a license. But you can have a Christian, we call it open air, like preaching the gospel.
Right.
And then maybe 25, 30 yards away, you'll have the Muslims with their table with Qurans, free Qurans for people, and they will be preaching the Islam message. Do you have that as yet on your
I
streets?
imagine in some of our cities, bigger cities, we might have. I don't think we have it in Nashville that I know of, but I think we probably have it in some of the bigger cities. It's possible.
But I have never come across, obviously, my ears to the ground in this one because I'm a preacher, and I'm thinking about my fellow preachers who are street preachers and who are getting arrested. But I have to say, could be wrong, I'm not an expert, but I have yet to see any video of a Muslim street preacher being arrested.
Right.
Oh,
And also we talked about this before, the grooming gangs. That
Yes.
was an actual. That's real. That's not something that's fabricated.
No, it's very real, and where we live in Sheffield, and that area in England is particularly tainted with this, and more than tainted. It's an absolute scandal. It's been going on for years, and I think it was around about 2013, 2014 that it actually was begun to be dealt with legally by the police. What happened to those young girls, particularly young girls in care, was shocking. It is still ongoing in Muslim communities, and I would have to say this: that there was an MP, I cannot remember her name, but it was around about 2019, and when she was speaking up about this and the fact that not all of these grooming gang perpetrators, not all of them, but the vast majority were Asian men. And she lost her job for saying that. And now we can kind of talk about that because it's a fact. We're not making, it's also a fact in London, for example. We have to face the fact that in London, the biggest involvement in knife crime and gang crime in London are young black males. But for years we couldn't say that because you're being racist. No, but that's just the facts.
Yeah.
We're not making
Are they
it
Muslim?
up.
Are they predominantly Muslim?
In terms of the grooming gangs?
Well, the grooming gangs and the stabbers.
Oh no, I wouldn't necessarily say for knife crime. Certainly, the grooming gangs are definitely the majority of them are Asian men, and I would have to hazard a guess, not because I'm on your program, but if you were to ask me directly, I would presume that they would be. But certainly, there is an Asian mindset. You don't need me to tell you this, that has a view of women that downgrades them, and even in the Quran itself
Yep.
talks about how that I was reading it last night in preparation, and that females are double worthy of being in hell, and all the rest of it, and they have a low view of women in general, but I would also suggest white.
So we kid when we say hell
European.
hath no fury like a woman scorned, but they really believe it, huh?
Well, I don't know about that, but that's the case, and that is just the fact. That is not us being racist, but that's an example of a culture, and a culture in our country that needs to be challenged and needs to be educated what British values are.
Right.
And that is the nub of the problem. that people are coming, wherever they're coming from, that they're wanting to come and
Bring
live
their
in our
country with them.
country. Yes,
Right.
but I always say to people who think that I'm very harsh and unreasonable about this, I'll say to them, if you want to see the true face of Islam, which is not a religion of peace, it's a religion of submission,
Yep.
submission through force and fear. I'll say to folk, don't take my word for it. Go and look at a Muslim-dominated country,
Yep.
and you'll see how your free speech is dealt with and how your protests wouldn't be allowed, and see how they deal with Christians there.
Yep.
And then I said, that is the true face of Islam. And you're right, that is ultimately the threat, isn't it? And in United Kingdom, we're certainly not there yet. There are Muslim communities, there's no question about that, just like there are other kinds of communities. Nothing wrong with that in terms of the idea of it, but they are run on fear, and there is Sharia law. And if I can clarify this, Sharia law is practiced in Britain.
In the communities, not officially recognized, but in the communities.
It's not practiced throughout the United Kingdom, but it is practiced within communities. It doesn't have legal standing or legal recognition in the United Kingdom, but it is there, and it is practiced, if I could say, unofficially. I would rather, if it is allowed, yes, it is allowed. But I think that the police and the government generally look the other way, and they tolerate it because they don't know how to monitor it and detail it.
Yeah, what you tolerate, you get more of. That's
and they
for
don't
sure.
want another. They don't want another protest on their own hands about something within their own country. It's bad enough having protests every week where what's happening in Gaza, never mind whatever's is being kicking off in our own country.
Right. So, but do you think enough people have had it in England? Enough of the natives have had it to where things are going to turn around?
Yes, I think politically ultimately our greatest hope is Jesus Christ. But politically, I think our greatest hope is reform, headed up by Nigel Farage. I think if we had a general election now and people voted in terms of how they're feeling now, if the Reform Party were not elected to government, they would certainly be elected as the second party, which is termed in our country the official opposition. And they are making great strides because they're talking common sense. They're not racist. You know, I don't endorse everything about Nigel Farage the same way as I'm sure all of you would not necessarily endorse anything about Donald Trump. But he is a good president from what I can see.
Right.
And he's cut from a similar cloth as Nigel Farage in that these two men, they're not traditional politicians. They are saying what the rest of us think.
Right.
But oftentimes don't have the courage to say. There's a general reaction in our country against woke. You know, the woke business.
Oh, yeah.
That's a general reaction in our country, of which the reaction that you're asking me about is a good instance of it. People are beginning to get fed up. For example, your nation is a nation of flags, isn't it?
What's that?
Your nation is a nation of flags.
Flags.
You know, you fly your flag.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, in Britain, since the summer, there's been flags being put up all over the place as an expression of people wanting to be British.
Yeah.
And
I've seen some of that. Yeah.
We live in a British country. Do you know what? They've been criticised by that, even by government, as hijacking the Union Jack because they're being racist. And what they're doing is that's the only outlet some of them have, is to fly a British flag to say, you know, we still live in a British country with all our freedoms and all our values. They're not trying to make legal immigrants as opposed to illegal immigrants.
Right.
They're not trying to make legal immigrants feel unwelcome or be in fear. They're just reminding themselves and trying to stake a claim that as yet we're not Great Britain anymore. We haven't been great for a while, but we are still the United Kingdom.
But you're still Britain, right?
We are still Britain, but not great, I'm afraid.
Well, Cathy, we got some concerns over here And in some ways,
Yeah.
I think they're not as bad, but in other ways, I don't know. We got some shady places.
Well, some of the similar things that I was kind of thinking about is, Nigel Farage and our president Trump. I think at least Farage knows when to shut up. I mean, Trump today was just, going on about everything. But the similarities, talk about Sadiq Khan, who's the mayor of London. I kind of think he resembles and kind of imitates Mondami down in New York City.
Yeah.
So for those that aren't familiar with, Zoran Mondami, he is claiming to be a socialist, and he is going to win New York City. The problem with that, as you had said, Stuart, that Sadiq Khan wasn't necessarily elected by the masses of Muslims, but rather probably those to the party. And that's the same thing I think that's going to happen in New York City. It's not all Muslims there.
Yeah.
But and I certainly want to talk about this because for us here, this is not good because the gentleman, and I use that term loosely, on the right with the white is Siraj Wahhaj.
Yep.
He also has had connections with Sadiq Khan over in the UK. But he was on the original list of co-conspirators for the first World Trade Center bombing back in 1993.
Yep.
And so he hates us. He hates us. He's told us that he hates us. But I think we have a brief clip, Kevin, of how he started off originally opening the prayer for Congress, the first time a Muslim was invited to open the prayer in Congress. And then we have him in a speech that he was giving shortly after that, and what he really thinks about America. And this kind of all falls into, they have the television version of themselves and the public version, but then when you catch them saying things. And so this is the guy that Mondami was so pleased to be with, and so, talking about how he is so just a good man, and he has a great following in Bed-Stuy, which is in New York City. So if you've got that, Kevin, can we just hear that real quick?
Okay.
In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, guide the leaders of this nation who have been given a great responsibility in worldly affairs. Guide them and grant them righteousness and wisdom.
Siraj Wahhaj, a sometime leader and prominent speaker at events hosted by American groups connected with the Muslim Brotherhood, was chosen to give the first Muslim invocation before Congress in 1991. Here's Wahhaj in front of his own congregation long before his congressional appearance.
Every day they would go to school and they put an American flag in front of these little babies, Muslim babies. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. Bullshit!
Here he is after his congressional appearance.
I want to defend this country. You know what this country is? It's a garbage can. It's filthy. It's filthy and sick.
So, that's who Mondami is associating with and very proud to associate with. And then we go back to the relationship in Tennessee. He's been here several times. He's been at the Islamic Center of Nashville. Back when the American Muslim Advisory Council was first formed, back in, I think it was like 2013, 2012, around then. He was a guest here with Droz Koke, the wonderful Kurd that we always talk about. But, yeah. So then he also has a connection to Knoxville. And so he's been in this state quite a bit. And so here we have these, I don't want to call them extremists because that's what we don't do. We don't label, there's no such thing as radical Islam. And so we don't say there's extremists. He's just a terrorist. And so, we see a lot of the likeness with how these people are elected. And I think the elections are a big worry to us. CARE has said back in 2023 that there were 154 Muslims that ran for office throughout this country. We know that not 153 won, but there was a sizable number. I believe it was like 50 throughout the country that won different positions. And so as they win these positions, they're in the actual position to effect change, and that's how it happens because they have the power, and that's why I think a lot of them are going for the Muslim or for the mayoral positions throughout the country. We've got the guy in Dearborn, Abdullah Hamoud, who recently, during a live, duly official position meeting, where he chastised a Christian man who was standing up about 2 streets being renamed Hezbollah and Hamas. And so this mayor proceeded to tell him, close your eyes when you drive down that road because that's going to be the way it is. And he said, if you were to move out of this city, we would rejoice. We would have a parade in the honor that you left. And so, that's the mindset. Once they get to be mayor, they're elected forever. We've lost Dearborn. We know that. Dearborn, Michigan is, they have actually enclaves for just Muslims. And it is under Sharia law. They will not allow Christians to walk down the street with a cross. And so it's really unfortunate that that's happening. But we also have it in Minneapolis, where he was a state senator now, Omar Fatah, who's now running for the mayor of Minneapolis. And so he has the same mindset as Mandami. It's free education, it's free everything, and government-run grocery stores and things like that. So we'll see how that works out.
Now, in Minnesota, they have quite a few Somalis, so, I'm sure that helps them get elected there. But it's not that they don't necessarily have to have, just like in England, they didn't necessarily have to have a Muslim majority because the left will vote for these people. The far left will vote for these people no matter where they're at, to include Nashville, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, we're going to talk about our Nigerian queen, Zulfat Swara. She's from Nigeria, and she does have, so she claims royalty back in Nigeria. But this is the same woman that has allowed masses amount of Christians to be slaughtered in her town, and has never ever come out and condemned what is happening to the Christians. But our fear, and we've talked about this before, Dave, she is now a member at large on Nashville's Metro City Council. And she was not elected by a Muslim majority. Obviously, she was elected by, she had very large numbers, but it was her districts who are immigrants. Probably a lot of them have moved on and been arrested. Actually, we won't go there, but she was elected, and she's very well loved. We know that. We see that all the time. But we feel that she may be running for mayor, going to run for Nashville mayor. There's no indication yet from her that she will do that, but she is the choice. And we know that she's probably been handpicked to do so. The problem with her is that we know when she was sworn in as the at-large member for the council, they're always getting sworn in on the Quran, which is totally against anything. It's against the Constitution. How do you carry on with something that they don't believe? And they don't believe in man-made law. They believe in Allah's law. And then let's not forget, she also was Bernie Sanders' representative or senior representative here for his campaign. So that socialist tie is running through her as well.
The Red-Green Alliance.
Oh yeah, the Red-Green Alliance is huge. And so I think we have to really start paying attention and start talking about her so that when the time comes, and I think it's just in a couple of years when
she's the at-large candidate on the right.
Yeah. So Zulfat has been with Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Linda Sarsour, all the terribly anti-Semite Muslims that are well known and are very vocal in being
anti-American, period.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, we know Ilhan Omar does not like America. Most Somalians don't. That's been the experience that we've had with them. They just don't like us at all. But Zulfat has these ties, and she has claimed publicly that she is inspired by Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. And so, there we have the kind of anti-Semite thread running through her as well. And we know that she's anti-American. We've done articles on her being at different activities throughout Nashville, and she always displays the American flag upside down, and it never ever is supposed to be done that way, and she kind of cherishes that. And so we know that she's going to be a problem if she wins, but I fully expect her, if she runs, to win. So, when you start talking about what's happening as far as the political part in Britain, it's very similar to here. And we talked about the diversity. Of course, it's diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Right.
I would imagine it's the same way in the UK. But diversity is what they will run on. And of course, equity and inclusion that's covering so many things other than the Islamic issues. It's also the LGBTQ, whatever else comes after that.
But they're all working together to throw us out, or to overthrow us. That's what they're all working together for.
Well, do you remember back, I think it was when Hillary Clinton was still Secretary of State, they were working on something with other countries, and I believe the UK was one of them. It was called the Organization of Islamic Cooperation.
Yeah, I remember that.
And they were trying to pass a blasphemy law,
Yep.
So that you could not speak about Allah or Muhammad. And so, well, there has been problems here when people talk about Muhammad. I think, in all fairness, it is, he did marry a 6-year-old. That's been confirmed, and they don't, they don't deny that, and they don't certainly condemn it. But, the blasphemy law, will we at some point not be able to talk as Christians? Will we not be able to talk about Jesus? And so that's probably not far off. I haven't followed that law lately, but ever since that was brought up, there are still members of the OIC that reside here in this country. And then the other problem that we have here is certainly the United States Muslim of Council organizations.
Yep.
And they form their own political party. They're not active and they don't really talk about it. But the Muslims now in this country have their own political party. And so we've actually got members of the Muslim community in Nashville, actually in Franklin, that have been to those conferences. And when you look at who was there, it's every Muslim Brotherhood terrorist organization that has been involved in it.
They are working the Muslim Brotherhood's plan via, per what the explanatory memorandum lays out. They're working their plan, and like I said, our government's known about this. The FBI knew about it 20 years ago. They're doing nothing about it.
Yeah, I did give Stuart a copy of it. It is the plan for the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is so infiltrated into this country, but specifically in Tennessee, because it's considered the buckle of the Bible Belt.
Yeah.
Well, as our dear friend Bill Warner used to say, that buckle is down around our knees right now, because we've allowed these organizations to not just, thrive, they're flourishing here. And Hamas is one of them. And we actually have members of Hamas throughout our state here. And so when we talk about annihilating Hamas, we don't talk about disbanding it here or making it illegal here, and it is listed as a foreign terrorist organization.
Yeah, if we want to kill some Hamas, why do we don't have to go to Gaza to do that? We got Hamas here. I mean, I don't know why we allow that.
They're on 600 college campuses throughout our country. There's chapters everywhere. Here in Tennessee, it's also known as the American Muslim Advisory Council.
Yeah.
They start using different names so that they're not thrown into that pile, but we know that they are Hamas. They're funded by CARE. And so, we have this problem in this country. When we're talking about people who are afraid to speak out, we're a little more bold than that here. We do speak out quite often, and we are labeled Islamophobes, which in our country is kind of different because it is defined differently. They talk about it being, well, it's changed over the years. But certainly the Muslim Brotherhood did take credit for inventing that word. And at first it came out that it was just a fear of Islam, an irrational fear of Islam. And so I think now it's pretty much It's not used as much as it used to be. People have been fired, however, for being accused of being an Islamophobe. I've been called that several times. I can't be fired from my job because I don't have one, so it's okay. But the fear of speaking out doesn't really feel bad doing it under Trump, but had it been under Biden, or certainly if Clinton would have won, it would have really changed, I think, the way we do things here. And so I think that it's really important to know that people are still kind of, I think they're catching on. I think we're seeing the woke crowd is always going to be the woke crowd, but there are people within that are awakening. And I do see that more, especially across social media platforms. But it still isn't to the point. And I just wanted to ask you something. When we talked about Islam as a religion, that drives me crazy, because we consider it more of a political way of life under the guise of a religion. But they have always been viewed in this country as 14 years of a religion. But when you read the Quran, and I've urged people to make sure that you read it the way that it is. Don't separate necessarily the Mecca years versus the Medina years, because in the Mecca years he was obviously very peaceful. He existed with Jews. It wasn't a problem. But then on the run to Yathrib or Medina is when he didn't have enough people to convert to Islam. So therefore he became violent. And that's when the military part became more prevalent. And so there is abrogation in the Quran where they do they'll mix the Mecca years and say he was peaceful in the Medina years. And so that's something else that they're very good at doing. But when you look actually through the Quran, and I was recently asked to come up with some surahs in the Quran that are anti-Semite and anti-Christian. And right off within the first 10 minutes, I was able to come up with 13 surahs that talk about, And so then, from there we went on to the textbooks that the children in the schools are being taught in our own state. And they urged, Muslim students, do not be friends with Christians and Jews because you will be like them. And then further, I think what's even worse than that is the opening prayer that's said 5 times a day. At the very end talks about Allah lead us in the way of your grace, in the right way, not that of those that you led astray or were angered by. And when you look at the hadiths, the traditions and the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, those experts have said that yes, he meant the Christians and the Jews. And so, it's very difficult to understand that principle that, there is 109 verses at least that talk about death to the infidels, which we are all infidels here. And so, how peaceful is that religion? I say, but it's kind of hard to understand that. And so there was just a wonderful article in the Washington Standard, I think it was, and they ended it by talking about the radical Islam. And so I wrote to the editor and to the author, and I said, I want you to consider there isn't a Quran that's called the radical Quran. It's the Quran, period. And Islam is Islam. Islam may be radical, but I don't like to preface it with radical or radical Muslims. They are following.
There's only one. There is only one Islam, and it's all radical by our standards. But there's only one. There's not a moderate brand as far as their doctrine goes, or a radical brand as far as the doctrine goes. There's only one doctrine. Now, they may not all follow it, but if they follow it, if they follow the doctrine, then they are a danger, and they are not a good fit in our society. Matter of fact, they're not a good fit in civilization in general, in my opinion. Hey, I appreciate.
Can I just pick up with just very quickly on something you talked about, that lady swearing an oath on the Quran? our Home Secretary is Shabana Mahmood. She became Home Secretary only very recently, and she took her oath of office on the Quran. She's responsible, our Home Secretary is responsible for policing, for law enforcement, for border control. And, you made some references, Surah 9816 refers to Jews and Christians as, quote, the worst of all creatures. Surah 310, Muslims are the best of peoples raised up for mankind, which is the fundamental strategy that you're talking about.
Yes.
And then Surah 332, quote, Allah does not love the unbelievers. And so we're all in trouble from that perspective.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. There is only one version, one standard, and there can be no reconciliation and reasonable discussion.
And there's no reformation for Islam either.
No.
We've had, I think it's Ali Hersey, the Somalian or the Ethiopian, I think she is. She has fatwas on her head. She has death threats on her head because she felt that Islam could be reformed. So did, what's
Judy Sasser? Judy
yeah,
Sasser? Something like that. Yeah.
So, that's right, Jazzer.
Yeah, that one. You're right.
So when they talk about that, they become enemies of Islam and, the death threats and everything else. But, that's it. I think our countries are both suffering to the point of that the problem has reared its head within our countries and is spiraling in some cases here out of control, and we've allowed it to. Yeah. Losing cities, Hamtramck, Michigan, and Dearborn, Michigan. Yeah. We know that they're effectively done as far as ever being back to a Christian-based city, and so that's dangerous.
Absolutely. Well, hey, I appreciate both of you coming on. Maybe we can do this again next year when you come in. And
I'd be glad to.
I definitely appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you, Cathy. I appreciate what all of you do. I hope you have a safe trip back, and I hope you don't get in trouble when you get back for coming on the show.
I'm sure I'll be fine. Thank you.
But be sure to share it to every like-minded person over there, okay? Well, hey, thanks. We're going to have to let you go, and once again, we do appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave.
Y'all take care. I want to thank the audience for taking the time to watch our program tonight. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe, so please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons as well as the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. Thanks again to Jonathan and Mary for their financial support from July through October. You guys are great. We really, really appreciate it. It's a huge help. Check out our audio podcasts on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other platforms as well. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, tninformer.com. Find and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. A few announcements real quick. Meet and greet with Monty Fritz Tuesday, 6 to 9 p.m., October 21st, that's tomorrow night, at Coley Hill Farm, 740 Sam Martin Road in Dandridge, Tennessee. Sponsored by Empowered Severe. The Henry County GOP will host a meet and greet with Monty Fritz, who's running for governor in 2026, October 23rd, 6 p.m. at Tom's Pizza, 2501 East Wood Street. Please arrive early if you intend to eat. The Stuart County GOP will host a meet and greet for Monty Fritz on October 30th, 6:30 p.m. at the Stuart County Visitor Center. If you haven't heard Monty speak, you need to. Retired police investigator Mike Elam joins us to tell us the true story of Buford Pusser. Just say the walking tall legend has fallen. He's our second show tonight at 8:30. Next week, our guest will be Cathy Hinners and Andrea Gomez of Tennessee Fair Elections, here to discuss a proposed election bill of rights. And for show number 2, next week we have Josiah and Samantha Baker of the Mises Institute. They'll join us to talk about the mission of that group and their role in it. Hope you can join us. That's it for now. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.